So good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot, daf kaf bet, and we will begin at the bottom of kaf aleph on the bet. We have been talking about the certification of documents in court, and so we've been discussing complications, such as the complication when one of the judges says that one of the judges, two of the judges could be witnesses, but the third judge doesn't know anything about the signatures, and so how do we handle that? We also dealt with what happens if some of the witnesses don't are only able to testify if the two witnesses that signed at the bottom of the contract are only able to testify about part of their of the signatures, meaning that they're only able to testify about their own signature, but not about the other person's signature. And we had a debate in the Mishnah on that. Now we turn to another complication, the complication of what happens if a judge dies between the testimony and their actual writing of the certification. So they did not have a chance to all sign the certification, but they did, from a legal perspective, actually process it. So let's take a look. So we're going to begin fourth word from the beginning of the line, third line from the end of the page on Kaf Aleph on the bet. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. So they said in the name of Rab, Shlosha sheyashu l'kayim es hashtar. You have three judges who are sitting together to confirm to certify the contract. V'kara ar al echad mehen. Oh, so now actually this is not yet the death case, but we're going to see that we'll see that in a moment. But now somebody, a rumor or some sort of negative rumor of some sort exists, is heard about them. So it could be that somebody comes into court and says something, or it could just be that there's this rumor going around, and now we have to address it because there's a concern that maybe one of the judges is not a kosher judge. Ad shelo chasmu, if all three judges have not, if the other two judges, have not yet signed the certification, so then me'idin alav v'chosim, they themselves, those judges who are sitting with him, because the court case has officially not begun, or the decision has not begun, so they can actually testify to his validity. So let's say, we'll see what this is talking about, because why don't we say that there are two witnesses and two witnesses? But let's say that there's just a rumor about his bad lineage, and so maybe he's a slave or something. So as a result, he would not be allowed to participate. So me'idin alav v'chosim, the two remaining judges have the ability to testify about this third judge, and to then enable him and all of them to sign. So mishachasmu, however, once the first two judges have signed, ein me'idin alav v'chosim, then he's not allowed to judge. And if we take a look at the bottom Rashi on Kaf Aleph Amabet, why mishachasmu? Once they sign, Rashi says havulahu nogim be'edut sheganai lahem sheyeshvu im psul b'din, because once they've signed, they've effectively begun their work together as a court. And now, for the fact that they went ahead and sat with somebody who was not kosher, that would be embarrassing to them. That would be a black mark on their record. And so as a result, they would have a personal incentive to in the matter, and as a result, we're not going to trust their testimony. However, if they had not yet sat down and to judge the case, and they hadn't yet signed anything, well then fine. Well, if it turns out that the guy's not a good judge, so there's no loss to them. There's no record of them having sat together, and so as a result, they they are believed when it comes to testifying about this third judge. So now the Gemara asks the obvious question: Arm demai, what's the nature of this, concern that is raised regarding them? If the concern is that it turns out that the guy is a thief, Well, then it must have been that there were two witnesses who came to tell us that, and treyu trey ninhu. We have two witnesses against two witnesses. So what should it matter whether or not um, uh, uh, you know whether or not they testify? Two witnesses is never enough to overcome two witnesses. Now, this is again, we're going to interpret this according to Rashi. Tosfos has a different interpretation, which we'll provide at the end. So again, so here the two other judges are want to testify on his behalf, and it doesn't make a difference whether they testify on his behalf, because it's going to be 2 versus 2, and there's nothing to be done about it. So ERR dipagam mishpacha, and if in fact the concern is about the nature of the family, meaning that there's a slave that and in his family tree, and as a result he should also be considered a slave. Gili milsa ba'almahu, that is just a gili milsa, a public matter. And so as a result, as Rashi understands it, that they, the facts will come out. And even so, we'll take a look at the Rashi, last of the wide lines at the top of Rashi on Kafbet Amud Aleph. Gilui milsa ba'almahu mishachasmu. Once they sign, amai ein me'idin alav. Why can't they testify? Because their testimony, as Rashi understands it, is not in fact a true classic testimony. Rather, my chashad nogea beitz. What's our concern about them being affected by their testimony? Ika hacha. Why would be such a concern? Davar zeh tzrichen hein lebarer. The court will still need to clarify and determine the facts. The davar ha'asui legalos ho, and this is something that is naturally going to come out. Meaning, once that there's a rumor about somebody's lineage, then they'll check it out. Sheyibdeku acharab, they'll check out afterwards. They'll go look at historical grave plots and the like. Ad sheyiborer, until it becomes hadavar, until the matter becomes clear. Ve'ein edutan shel elu tali b'hagadatan. Ve'einan ela migali davar ba'alma. And their testimony, their involvement in the case, to say, hey, go look in this cemetery and go look in that cemetery, and you'll see that this guy is truly a kosher guy. So then that is going to be something that they should be able to do even after they sign. So we have tried to highlight what the concern could be. And what we found is, if the concern is about theft, well, then who cares when? Even if it's before they testify, it's a problem, because you get 2 against 2, and that's not going to help us. So who cares whether it's whether the other judges testify? We're still going to be concerned about the matter. And if it's about the guy's lineage, why does it matter whether or not it's before or after they sign either? Because even after they sign, they should be able to testify. So la'olam emalach ar degazlanusa. Really, I could tell you that it's about a concern of theft. The ka'amri haniyad inan be de abad tshuva. And what is it that they're testifying? The other 2 judges are not testifying that the first witnesses were wrong at all. Rather, they're testifying that in fact the guy did do the theft. And he did the time associated with it, so to speak. He did the tshuva that was necessary in order for him to become a kosher person again. And so, as a result, that additional testimony is only going to be good before the other 2 judges sign on the dotted line. But once they sign on the dotted line, then it's going to be a problem, because then they are nogea b'davar. So that was all according to Rashi. Tosfos is going to explain this a little differently. And why? Because Tosfos is concerned about the following. When you have 2 and 2, 2 witnesses and 2 witnesses, Tosfos says, I don't understand. If you have 2 against 2, we will often leave the person in their kosher status. We'll go back to their original status. And if their original status was kosher, well, then we'll say that the person is kosher. And so from his perspective, that he doesn't understand why treyu trey should be a problem. So instead, he says that we're not talking about the judges being the witnesses, but we're talking about two people from the marketplace coming in to testify. And what's the logic here? The logic is actually the reverse of what Rashi says, that in the case of Treyu Trey, what does it matter whether the witnesses come before the judges write on the dotted line or after the judges write on the dotted line? In the end, when they say that the person, if the original witnesses say he's a Gazlan and the other witnesses say he's not, we go back to his original status, and the court was never an illegitimate court because we say that his status was effectively legitimate the entire time. So it doesn't make a difference whether it's before they sign or after they sign, because we're not concerned about the witnesses themselves. We're not, there's nothing explicit in the Gemara talked about a concern about the witnesses themselves being Nogeya B'davar. It seems that from Tosfos' perspective, the question is, did a court ever begin their actions with an illegitimate member? And if the court began their actions with an illegitimate member, well, then we're going to have a problem. But if the case is 2 against 2, so Tosfos says there's never been an illegitimate member, so we're totally fine. And if the concern is about the tainted lineage, well, then there's always been a tainted member, because you can never fully disprove that. So there's essentially always going to be a problem, and it doesn't make a difference whether, again, the other two witnesses come before or after. You're never going to be able to definitively testify to the guy's kashrus. So again, in both cases, Tosfos essentially flips it and puts it in the other direction, and therefore, when we answer, so la'olam emelach arar digazlanusa, and so when Tosfos says, really, we're talking about theft. The ka'amri honey yedi'inan beida avid tshuva, and so, but now they're saying that yes, he was a thief, but he did tshuva. So as a result, if it's before they write on the dotted line, so then the problem is that so then it's totally fine, because they have confirmed that the court is legitimate the entire time that the court is acting as a court. But if the first two judges have already signed on the bottom line before the second set of witnesses come and testify about his legitimacy, well, then we have a problem, because at some point the court was working and the guy was considered a thief. And so as a result, and everybody agrees that he was a thief. So as a result, the court's legitimacy is going to be questioned, and it's going to be a problem. So those are the two different ways that Tosfos and Rashi understand this Gemara.
By maligning the third judge before he signs?
Well, if two witnesses come, yes, I mean, on some level. So, I don't know what the judges do to protect that, but presumably, if they sign all together at the same time and not in front of the court, not while the court is in session and where anybody can complain, so then presumably that's a way to prevent that. But it would seem like that would be a potential strategy. Of course, you have to be lying, and then you can be punished for the lie that's associated with it. Okay, so now now we deal with a case where unfortunately one of the judges died. So I got a little bit ahead of myself there. So now we deal with case number 2, with what happens if one of the judges dies before he has a chance to sign. So we're going to have 2 different potential approaches. So Amar Rabbi Zera, Hamilsam Rabbi Abba Shmili. I learned something from Rabbi Abba. The Ilav Rabbi Abba Demin Akko Shachachta. And if it not for Rabbi Abba of Akko, I would have forgotten it. So, basically 2 Rabbi Abbas were, help Rabbi Zera remember the following rule. You have 3 people sitting to judge a contract and confirm and certify that it's a legitimate contract. And one of them died after they heard all the testimony, but before they signed. Well, what can they write in their certification? That this was testified, we sat as 3 judges but one of us is no longer. So as a result, that's why there are only two signatures. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak v'iksav bei. That there's a Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says there's another alternative to what we could write in the document, and we're going to state a statement, clarify it once, and clarify it a second time till we get the right answer. So the first is v'ikasav bei shtara dinan nafek lekadmana bei dina tu lotzar. If you say that this document emerged in front of a beis din, well then that would be sufficient to indicate that it must have been in front of three judges, even though two judges signed. One second though, the Dilma beis din chatzavu, maybe it's an arrogant beis din, a beis din that thinks that they can handle things even with just two judges. The Kiddush Shmuel, because Shmuel said the following: the Amr Shmuel, Shnaim shedanu dinehen din, that if you have two judges who judge a court case, Ella, that their decision is a valid decision. Ella shenikra based in chatzuf, but they're considered an arrogant court because they felt that they could judge even with just two judges. Because the basis for two judges is the thing that is in plural, and then we use the third judge so that we don't have a tie. So on some level, Shmuel, is saying that if you have two judges who agree to one another, maybe that would be sufficient. So T'ksiv bei dina derabana ashi. So then we clarify and we say, okay, so don't say that you just said it in front of Beit Din. Say that you did it in the Beit Din of Rabbi Ashi or Rav Ashi. So, one second, the Dilman Rabbanan debate Rav Ashi, Kiddush Shmuel Sfir Lahu. How do you know that the students in that yeshiva, in Rav Ashi's yeshiva, don't hold like Shmuel? Maybe they agree with Shmuel that two judges is sufficient. So, Diksiv Bey V'Amar Lana Rabbana Ashi. No, say, and Rav Ashi told us. So that indicates. So what does Rav Ashi told us mean? So let's take a look at Rashi. It's the last Rashi before the Mishnah on Kaf Bet Amud Aleph. So for Amar Lana Rav Ashi, that it shows that he got involved, that he was sort of like a witness in the matter. And in order to establish this contract, the Kavan de Rav Ashi Gufe his Kikan, since Rav Ashi himself is such an important person and he himself got involved, he certainly would have been telling his testimony to three witnesses. To three judges, excuse me, please. Now that was explanation number one. So explanation number one is Rav Ashi served as a witness. That when it says Rav Ashi told us, it means Rav Ashi served as a witness, and his involvement means that there must have been three judges. The Yesh Mefarshim, but the other approach is to say the following: no, the Amar Lana Rabbana Ashi Tulasa Ninhu. No, by saying Rav Ashi told us, you end up with three judges. That Rav Ashi was a judge, and then he told us. Us is plural. That means two. So 1 plus 2, that's 3. So therefore, there were three judges. But Rashi says he doesn't like that. Rav Ashi chad minahon, because if Rav Ashi was one of the three, what does it mean that he told us? Why are we including that? What is one judge telling the other judges? But if in fact he's a witness, then that's a better proof according to Rashi. So that's the two approaches to understanding that. And so the bottom line is that we now have two different ways. Either we can say that we sat as three judges and one passed away, or we can say that the document came in front of us and an important witness was involved, indicating that of course they would not have been involved other than in front of a legitimate court of three judges. Okay, so now we go back to the concept of Pesha Asar, Pesha Hitter, that the mouth that prohibited something is the mouth that permitted something, and therefore let's believe the person who's testifying. So we go to the first case, Ha'isha Shamra Eishas Ish Hayiti Ugrusha Ani Ne'emenes. If a woman says, I was married, but now I am divorced, we believe her, because the only evidence that we currently have that she was married is herself. And so when she now says that not only was she married, but she was divorced, we'll trust the whole package, because she could have just come and said, I was never married. So, however, Shab Pesha Asar Hua Pesha Hitter, right? That we say this, that the mouth that caused her to be prohibited is the same mouth that causes her to be permitted. However, if there were witnesses that said, oh, she was married, and now she says, yeah, I was married, but I'm divorced, that's not enough. She would need to show her get document. It's an important document. You have to, just like you need to show your passport to be believed as to your citizenship, so too, she would need to show her appropriate documentation to show that she was in fact divorced. So Amrar Nishbesi Utahorani, similar case, but now talking about somebody who was taken captive. She says that she admits she was taken captive, but she says that she did not have any kind of illicit relationship. So then we believe her, because again, Shah Pesha Asar Hua Pesha Hitter. However, if in fact there were witnesses that say she was captured, and she says that I am in fact pure, so then she's not believed, because again, there were witnesses that established the negative fact. So as a result, we don't have Pesha Asar Hua Pesha Eter. So the im Mishenises Bo Edim. However, if after she has already married, the witnesses come forward, Harezo Lo Teitze, then she does not have to leave her husband. Now Rashi points out here in the last Rashi of the Mishnah, the Gemara Mefarish Ahai Kai, meaning on which statement does this go? Meaning, if the fact that that obviously we're talking about one of the situations where she's not believed, but which one? Is it the divorce case, or is it the I am pure case? Now, again, or is it both? Absolutely. Now, I will know one more thing. We will not answer that question today. We will, God willing, answer that question tomorrow. But the important thing to note is that in the Resha, the question is just her ability to marry, because the question is she divorced? It doesn't mean that she of course would not be allowed to marry a Kohen. In the second case, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about her ability to marry a Kohen, because of course she can marry somebody else, but if in fact she was in fact pure, meaning that she was still a virgin, so then she would also be able to marry a Kohen. Okay, so now the Gemara wonders what the source of this concept of Pesha Asar Hua Pesha Hitter is. So let's take a look. So Rav Asi, Amar Rav Asi, Minayin la Pesha Asar Hua Pesha Hitter Mina Torah. How can I tell you that this is actually a biblical concept? Shneamar SBT Nasati Leisha Zet Leisha. Okay, so let's first say what this pasuk is talking about. The pasuk means I've given my daughter to this man as a wife. So the issue is the following: a man comes and says, my wife was not a virgin on the night that we got married, and then the father of the bride comes and brings the evidence, namely the sheet that evidences the fact that in fact she had bleeding from her hymen on that night. And so he shows that, look, no, I've got that good evidence. And so as a result, the Torah punishes the man for making that claim. And they're punished in a couple of ways. First, there's a penalty, and I think if I got that right. And then the second thing and most important thing is that he's not allowed to divorce her against her will any longer. I'm not sure that she would want to stay with him, but in any event, we're talking, of course, at a time where unmarried women were considered not protected and were very vulnerable in society. So we want to make sure that she is protected. And so as a result, she gets to decide whether or not she is going to be divorced. So, but how does that teach us? So now that we know the context, let's take a look at it in detail. So SBT Nasati Laish, at that moment when he has said, I have given my daughter to a man, well, that Asara, Laish Asara. Once he says that, she must be prohibited to every man because we don't know who the man that she's married is. But now, hazeh, once he then adds the word hazeh, now hitira. Now she's permitted to the man that she married. So again, imagine I say, that I gave my daughter to John Doe, so or to this man, John Doe. So if I say I gave this daughter to this man, but it's not clear which man, well, then all of a sudden she's prohibited to every man. If that's all I were to say, she would be prohibited to every man. But then if I add this man, John Doe, well, then now it's no, she's married to John Doe and she can actually be with John Doe. So that is the nature of the conversation. So that we see that what began as a pesha usher, namely this man, all of a sudden, to the man rather, to a man or to some person, and now I say hazeh, that identifying which man. So that's the pesha usher who a pesha hitter. Well, 1 second, the Gemara asks, Lama likra, why do I need this? This is so logical. Svarahi. It's on some level, it's a fascinating thing that the Gemara is doing here. It's some way it's saying it's even better than it being explicit in the Torah. It's so logical. Of course we need to do it. Hu asara, v'hu sharila. He prohibited her, so he permitted her. So of course we should do it. So Ella. So now actually we're going to say that the concept of pesha asar, who a pesha hitter, is in fact all based on logic. Just like a kal v'chomer, right? A kal v'chomer says that if I can pick up 10 pounds, I can pick up 5 pounds. Yeah, it's a logical thing. You don't need necessarily the Torah to tell you that. So as a result, similarly here.
What difference does it make? Is there an nafka what the source is?
What are we trying to prove?
So we began by trying to prove what's the source.
Well, what difference does it make?
It's a good question. I had not thought about that question. I'm not sure of the answer. I don't know.
Okay. That's it.
Yeah, the Gemara is not going to answer that question because we're going to change topics in a moment after we explain it in another way. I have to do some thinking to see whether there's a nafkamina. I'm not sure that there is. The way I'm understanding this Gemara is not about there being a nafkamina, but about, is this just a logical statement, or did it require a source from the Chumash? Because if it's just a logical statement, so then it doesn't require a source from the Chumash.
Yeah.
But
it is a logical statement.
Absolutely, and that's the maskana. The havamina is that maybe it requires the source. So that's how I'm interpreting it, in which case there would not necessarily be any now.
Right. Kal v'chomer doesn't have a source, right? It's just a.
I don't think so. That's exactly right. Okay, so Ella ki itzrik, so kra l'chiderav huna amarav. So the reason that we need this pasuk is actually according to Rav Huna Amarav. It's because what did the Amarav Huna Amarav minayin la'av sheneman l'esor es bito min Torah? How do I know that the father is believed to forbid his daughter according to the Torah? Shenemar es bitina sati leish, because of the first part of that pasuk that I've given my daughter to a man, to the man, as a wife. Hazeh lamali. Why do I even need hazeh? So the point is, mi boile l'kedutani Rabbi Yonah. The point is it teaches us like Rabbi Yonah taught. So Datani Rabbi Yonah, SBT nasati leish hazeh v'lo liyabam. The point is that the Torah was talking about a husband who complains on the day after the marriage that his wife was not a virgin. So that complaint only applies to a traditional marriage. It does not, and that's why it says nasan leish hazeh, meaning it has to be given. It has to be a husband to whom the daughter has been given by her family on some level. But what is a case where a daughter is given to somebody and it's not from her family, that case is where we involve Yibum, where the first husband has died and now the woman is left over. And Yibum applies even when there's only been Kedushin / Erisin, and there has not yet been Nisuin. When there's only been a Kedushin or Erisin, the same two words referring to the same topic of the initial connection between them, that is a time when they're not allowed to engage in marital relations. And so as a result, if he dies before they end up getting married, so she falls to the Yavam, she falls to the husband's brother. And again, the husband's brother will naturally expect her to be a virgin because that was how she was supposed to be married to his brother. And if it turns out that she's not, these psukim do not apply because she was not, in fact, given from the family to the husband directly. Okay, so now we've seen that, in fact, the whole concept of Pesha Asur, who a Pesha Heder, is in fact logical and not necessarily based on a particular verse. So now the Gemara is going to quote a brisa that is going to deal with a fascinating situation of when maybe it is okay to tell something that is not true. So Tana Rabbanan, Ha'isha sha'amra eishes ishani. A woman first says, I am married. V'chazra va'amra penuya ani. And then she says that she's not married. Ne'emenes, we believe her. Well, 1 second. When in her first statement, again, when she's saying she's not married, she means I've never been married, just to be clear, not that she was divorced. If she says I am married and then I was divorced, so then we'll believe her because again, hapesha asur hu hapesha heder. But here we're dealing with a different situation. She first says I am married, and then she says no, I'm not married. So how can we allow her to do that? Once she says she's married, it's like she's made something prohibited for herself. If she says that this piece of meat is prohibited, so then we believe her. And it's certainly for her, it's going to be prohibited. So Amarava Barhuna, Kagon Shinasta Amasla Lidvareha. We're talking about a situation where she gave an explanation for why she said her initial statement. So Tanya Nami Hachi, and we have a brisa that teaches this same concept. So Amra Eishes Ishani, if a woman says I'm married, I'm a married woman, because Ravi Amra Penuya Ani, and then she says no, I'm not married, I've never been married. Eina Ne'emenes, she's not believed. 1 second, doesn't that disagree with what we just said? Well, now we clarify it. But if in fact she gives an explanation for what she said, well, then she's believed. So the answer is she's not believed unless she gives an explanation. Well, what's an example of it? That, this was this woman who was very prestigious and who was very, she had a lot of good looks. The katsu aleha b'nei adam lekacha, and lots of people were pursuing her in order to marry her. The amra lahem mikudeshasani. So she told them, "Listen, I'm already married. I am already married. I'm sorry, too late." Liyamim, but then a few days later, amda bekitsha es atzma. She went ahead and she got herself married. Well, 1 second. So amru lachacham, and the chacham said to her, "Ma re'isla soskin. How could you do this? You said you were married." So amru lachem. Initially, the people who came to me were not appropriate for me for marriage. So that's why I said I was married. Now that an appropriate man came to me, I went and got myself married. And so the bottom line is that in that situation, we'll believe her. Hela Rav Acha Sar Habira Livnei Chachamim Beusha, and Rav Acha, the prince of the Bira. So that was the of the capital city, I guess Bira is referring to, or possibly of the castle. Bottom line is that this he said this as the halacha in front of the rabbis in Usha. Va'amru im nasna amasla dvareha ne'emenes, and they responded, yeah, if she gives an explanation, so that then she's going to be believed. Obviously, she's got to give a reasonable explanation, just like the explanation that we heard just a moment ago. So, B'aimine Shmuel Marav. So Shmuel asked Rav, what about the following situation? Amra Tameya Ani. She said, a woman says, I am Tameh, meaning I am a Nida. So V'chazra Amra Tahoran. And then the next day, meaning she was Tahor on day 1. She says, I'm Tameh on day 2. And then she says, I'm Tahor on day 3. That just can't be in our Nida situation.
You said
So,
this to her husband?
yes, she's saying this to her husband, correct. So Mahu, what's the law? So Amar Le Afizo Im Nasna, and now we turn to Kafet Amabet, Amaslu Dvareha, Nemenes. If in fact she gives an explanation, we will believe her. So Tanamine Arba'in Zimnin. Shmuel reviewed this 40 times so that he would make sure that he would be able to apply it whenever it would happen. But however, when it came to himself, and there's a story about how his wife told him that she was tameh, and then the next day says that she's tahor, and it was basically, I had a headache. I didn't want to do anything with you last night. And so, the bottom line is that we should make sure that our spouses are, feel sufficiently comfortable that they can say, I have a headache, and not have to say, I'm tameh. But in any event, the halacha is that if in fact she were to say, I'm tameh, and then she were to say, listen, I said I was tameh, but really it was because I had a headache, so then we will believe her, even though maybe Shmuel's, is being specifically, especially religious, that he didn't want to hold by that for himself. Okay. So now we go to the next case. So Tanaraban, Shnayim Omrim. So now we're going to go back to our discussion of 2 witnesses that say a person died, 2 witnesses say that a person was divorced, 2 witnesses say that the person didn't die or wasn't divorced. So let's take a look and see what the story is. So Tanaraban, Shnayim Omrim Meis, Ushnayim Omrim Lo Meis. So 2 people say that the guy died, the husband died. 2 people say that he didn't. Shnayim Omrim Nisgarsha. 2 people say that he divorced her. Shnayim Omrim Lo Nisgarsha. No, he didn't divorce her. So Harezo Lo Tinase. That woman is not able to get married. The Nises, however, if she does get married, Lo Seitse. We do not force her to leave him. So Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi Omer, Menachem Bar Yossi says, no, Teitse, we do force her to leave him. So again, so we got now 2 views. One is one exactly, but everybody agrees that lechatchila she shouldn't get married, and only b'diavad if she does get married, then there's the debate. The Tanakama says she can stay. Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi says no, she's got to go. So Amar Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi. When is it that I'm talking about that she has to leave? I'm talking about a situation where the Eidim came before she got married. So when the Eidim who contradict the first set and say that in fact the husband is still alive, or that the husband did not divorce her, and they come only after she had gotten married, so then she would be able to, if she got married first and then the witnesses came, lo seitze. So even he would agree that if she got married in a legal fashion, because at that moment everybody thought that she was allowed to get married, we will not cause the 2 to be a problem. And the reason is that we're effectively keeping her in her current status, right? This Gemara is part of the reason why Tosos had the concern that he had with Rashi's understanding at the start of today. Because what do we do in each of these cases? We leave the woman in her known status before anybody came to court. And that in these situations is that she's married. Okay, so Mifti, let's take a look. Trayu Traininu. There are 2 witnesses in both directions. So how can we allow the husband to stay even in this case of coming afterwards? So the husband needs to be, every time he has marital relations, it's an uncertain situation. Is she still married, or is she in fact somebody that he can marry? That's a situation where we're uncertain about whether somebody is obligated in a sin offering. So shouldn't we say that you gotta get out of that situation? So Amar Rav Sheshes, and this we saw, I believe, in Yevamot, we saw this response. No, we're talking about where she married one of the witnesses who said either she was divorced or that she had or that her husband died. And that's why he is certain. He knows for himself that what he testified is true. And so as a result, we aren't going to force him to get divorced because for him, it is not an uncertainty case. So he gufa ba'ashem talei kayama. Well, what about her? She is in an uncertain situation, isn't she? Wouldn't she also be obligated in an asham taloi? No, Bilmeret variately, where it's talking about a situation where she says herself that she knows as well. And so as a result, we've narrowed the case of where we say that they do not need to get divorced only to the situation where it's one of the witnesses who saw either the divorce or the death, and and where she herself says that she is confident of her own status. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So now we're going to see that not everybody agrees with either the Tanna Kama or Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi. Indeed, Rabbi Yochanan is going to effectively come up with a compromise situation. And we're going to offer three explanations for the compromise. The third of those explanations is basically to say that the second of them is to say, in fact, that it's a compromise, that he holds a little bit like Rabbi Menachem Bar Yosef, but not totally. But let's take a look and we'll see it inside. So, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shnaim Omri Meis, Ushnaim Omri Lo Meis, Harei Ze Lo Tinaseh. That's what we saw already. If two people say she's married, two people says that her husband died, two witnesses say that her husband did not die. So Harei Zo Lo Tinaseh. She's not allowed to get married. The Im Nises Lo Tzeitze. But if she did get married, she does not have to leave the guy. And that was exactly what we saw the Tanna Kama say in earlier. And then we have Shnayim Omrim Niskarsha, Ushnayim Omrim Lo Niskarsha. Harezo Lo Tinaseh. Now, if in the case of a divorce, two say that she's divorced, two say she's not divorced, she's not allowed to marry. That's the same, everybody agrees with that. Ve'im nises teitze. However, in this situation, Rabbi Yochanan says that if she got married, she needs to leave him. Well, that's like Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi. So now we're going to see. So Ma'ishna Resha u'Ma'ishna Seifa. Why does Rabbi Yochanan differentiate between a death case and a divorce case? So we're going to offer three different explanations. So explanation number one is to say that actually, even though Rabbi Yochanan said Shnayim Omrim Shmeis, we're going to change it. Targuma Amar Abaye, Targuma Be'ed Echad. No, change his statement to say instead of two witnesses, we're talking about one witness. So Eid Achad Omer Meis. If you have one witness who says that the husband died, Heimnu Rabbanan Kibeitrei, right? We saw in the very first parak here that we treated them as if they were two witnesses, and the two, even though there was only one witness, or maybe we saw it in Yevamos. I think we saw it in Yevamos that we treat him as if there are two witnesses. We could do Ula, and this is like what Ula says. The Amr Ula Kol Makom Shehamina Torah Eid Echad. Whenever the Torah tells us to believe one witness, Harei Kan Shnayim, we treat them as if they were two witnesses. V'haida Ka'amar Lo Meis Havel Echad. And now, if in fact a single witness comes and says that she is not, that in fact the husband did not die, Ein Dvarav Shel Echad B'Makom Shnayim. Well, then we won't establish his words to contradict the quote unquote two witnesses who say that he had died, because we treat the one witness like two witnesses. And so as a result, that's what we're talking about. Well, one second, why don't we let her get married in the first place? Meaning, in Rabbi Yochanan's statement, we said, Harei Zel Lo Tinaseh, she's not allowed to get married. We should allow her to get married no matter what. So Gemara answers Mishum de Rav Asi. No, it's because Rabbi Yochanan agrees to what Rav Asi said. The Amar Rav Asi, Haser mimcha ikshus peh uzus v'sayim harchek mimeka. That you should always, of course, this is actually a statement from Mishlei, but Rav Asi would regularly quote this pasuk from Mishlei that you should keep yourself away from falsehood and any kind of inappropriate action. And so as a result, even though technically she would be allowed to marry, we're going to say only she can stay married if she got married b'diavad, but we won't tell her that she should marry in the first place.
Situation of safek.
Yes, this is a situation of safek.
So, okay. So so if it's a safek, she could get married. Right?
No, if it's a safek, then we recognize her initial status. Everybody knows that she was married. So as a result, her
force a divorce based on safek. Yes,
exactly. I mean, now if the husband's still around, obviously that's a great thing to do. We should eliminate the suffix, but and maybe we would even force him to divorce her. But we're assuming at the moment that the guy's not present, so there's nothing we can do about it.
Right. Is there any difference between not knowing and 2 versus 2? Do you know what I mean? Is 2 versus 2 the same as like nothing?
Yes. Yeah. Well, on some level, yes, I think. Well, yeah, I do think so. I think so, but I can't be sure. I'm not sure whether in every situation, but certainly in a general way, that you're absolutely right. So here we have a general knowledge of her being married, even her statement on her own, except for her statement that her husband, her husband died, where we had the whole discussion that we will believe her because of the whole Aguna issue. Here, if she were to just say that she was divorced, we would not believe her. So, so Seifa. So now, so Abaye has explained the ratio, meaning why is it that when you have 1 and 1, she's not allowed to marry, but if she did marry, she can stay with him. And the Seifa, Eid Echad Omer Niskarsha, we have one witness who says that she was divorced. The Eid Echad Amar Lo Niskarsha, Tarvaya Be'eshus Ish Kamasadi. Both of them effectively agree that she was married. But when it comes to one, the witness is saying she's divorced, only one says that. So we can't allow one witness to uproot 2 witnesses. So that's answer number 1, according to Abaye. Because if we take a look at, what do you mean in the death case?
Yeah.
In the death case, that's because as I am pretty sure, as we saw in Yevamot, we want to enable the woman to get married, and so as a result, basically based on the Gemara there, we determined that we're going to make effectively a special exception and say that even though in general you need 2 witnesses, in this case we'll believe the 1 witness, and once we believe the 1 witness, Ula says anytime you believe 1 witness, we treat the 1 witness like 2 witnesses. But in a divorce case, we don't say that. Correct, exactly. And although obviously technically and often today our agunot are as a result of a failure to give a divorce rather than a question of whether or not the husband is still alive, that's the way the bottom line has rolled out. So Rava Amar La'olam Treu Treininu, that really, in fact, we're talking about 2 witnesses and 2 witnesses. The Rabbi Yochanan Dvarav Shel Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi B'Girushin. That in fact we saw earlier, right? We saw earlier that Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi argued with the Tanakama, and Rabbi Yochanan is saying, I agree with him when it comes to divorce, but I don't agree with him below B'Mesa, but I don't agree with him when it comes to death. Well, my time, why? So that's a reasonable question. So Misa Eini Yechola Mechachshto. Well, when it comes to Misa, if the guy shows up, if the husband shows up, she has no argument left. So as a result, she is not going to be so obnoxious as to make a claim like that where there's nothing left for her to do if the guy shows up. But Gerishin, Yechola Mechachto. If the guy comes back and says, I didn't divorce you, she can still deny it and say that, yes, you did divorce me. So, Omi Chatzifa Kulehai. So now in second, would she be so obnoxious as to say that she was divorced when she wasn't? If you have a woman who, without any witnesses, says to her husband, you divorced me, we believe her. Because a woman is generally not going to be so obnoxious in front of her husband. Well, one second. So that would suggest that we should also believe her in the divorce case. We should believe her that she's not going to be so obnoxious in the death case, because obviously if the guy comes, she's left with nothing. And in the divorce case, we should believe her because a woman isn't so obnoxious as to say that she was divorced if she wasn't. So Hani Mili, no, that ruling of Rav Hamnuna, that's in a situation where she doesn't have witnesses. And remember, the statement of Rabbi Yochanan was assuming that there were two witnesses who say that she was divorced. So Abal Hecha Deika Edim to Kamasayale Meiza Umeiza. So in that situation where she would in fact have witnesses to support her, so then she can be so brazen because she's got witnesses. So we can't necessarily base our outcome on her actions, because in fact, the fact that she's got two witnesses who say that she was divorced, so in fact, we will say that maybe, and now we have two witnesses who say that she's not divorced, so now we're left with nothing, and we won't necessarily believe her alone. So that is Rava's explanation of Rabbi Yochanan. And finally, now we have Rav Asi's explanation. Rav Asi Amar could go into Amri Edim, Akshav Mace, Akshav Gersha. No, so we missed another important component here. It's not just that the two witnesses that Rabbi Yochanan are saying about the death or the marriage are saying that the person died at some point in the past, or the person divorced the woman at some point in the past. That they are saying that he just died, or she just got divorced. Well, in that case, Misa Lecha Vlevrura. When it comes to death, they didn't have death certificates with a time of death on it. So there's no way that you're going to be able to confirm the time of death. So there's nothing. There's nothing that can contradict. So therefore, we'll follow the two witnesses that say that the death occurred, and we'll allow her to stay married. But Gerushin, but when it comes to divorce, there's a way that we can clarify. Because we could say to her, Im Isa dahachi hava, if this is in fact what happened, show us your get. And when she's not able to show us her get, so then we won't believe her. Because again, as Rashi says, second to last Rashi, that in that short amount of time, she can't say that she lost her get. And so as a result, if she didn't have her divorce decree, if she didn't have the get, so then we won't believe her. And as a result, we'll tell her that she has to get divorced. However, in the case of death, then if she had gotten married, we'll allow her to stay married. So now tomorrow, stay tuned as we're going to continue the discussion of contradicting witnesses.
But if she lost her get and she could be prevented from remarrying, like if she
lost her get, lost her get immediately. So remember that there are a lot of different ways that she can prove it. Obviously, if she's got her get, that's a good proof. If she doesn't have her get and she has witnesses that she got divorced, that will be a good proof. If it's something that becomes publicly known, and then her status is known to have been a divorced woman, then she'll be believed. If in fact nobody knew about her marriage in the first place, and we have pesha aser hu pesha heter, so then again we shall be believed. The situation that we're talking about is either, and even if she's the only one who says it. So as we saw Rav Hamnuna say, that a woman is not so obnoxious as to say it. But this is actually an answer to your earlier question. This is a case where the 2 versus 2 is different from no one. In a case of no one will believe the woman over the man. But in a case of 2 versus 2, so then in that situation, that's the situation where she will, according to at least the Rabbi Yochanan, she would be stuck. And according to everybody, if in fact she got married only after all the witnesses came, so then and according to the Tanakama, even if the witnesses came b'diavad, she would be able to, it seems, stay married. So those are the different. This is you asked about whether or not there's a difference between no witnesses and 2 versus 2, and we can see that in this case, in the case of a get, there is a difference between 2 versus 2 and no witnesses whatsoever.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day, and God willing, see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi. See you tomorrow.